you just hold 1 second? I'm just going to get some glasses.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Thank you again for doing this.
Oh, no. We're giving presentations to students before, so nothing
I can see you now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so could you please introduce yourself and the organization that you work with?
Okay, I'll start. So I am Ariel, and I'm the Marketing Communication Specialist here at Streetohome Foundation.
I'm Tracy Harvey, and I am the Administration Donor Manager at Streetohome Foundation.
What inspired you to join Streetohome?
What inspired? Well, for me, I have worked in the nonprofit sector before, so I used to work at United Way. And so I'm used to I like working for an organization that isn't necessarily a frontline service provider, but someone who looks at the big picture of the system and see how they can address the gaps. And Streetohome met that bill. And so that's one of the reasons why I was very interested in working here.
Yeah, so on my end, I had studied journalism actually for my degree. This is my second kind of real job after having graduated. But I was really happy to learn that Streetohome acts as a bit like a think tank to broker and leverage sustainable solutions to homelessness. And that had really caught my eye because then I was able to kind of aggregate research and hopefully put it together in a way that people would be able to synthesize and learn how to implement new models.
That's really great.
Okay, so in your experience, what are the circumstances that lead to homelessness?
I think that's a very, very complex answer. I think there are many pathways into homelessness. We do know that it's not a preferred choice.
Yeah.
But we do know that in terms of root causes play a big part in that. So historical trauma, any addiction challenges, mental health challenges. There are people with both of those challenges. Some people have all of those challenges. So there's not one set reason as to why people become homeless. Poverty also plays a part. It is really a really complex answer, which is one of the reasons why it's really hard to necessarily solve it.
One of the other things we're kind of focusing on in terms of addressing causes is looking at the homelessness services system itself and how it addresses all of those root causes and how easy it is to really navigate that system, because that in itself can be quite a feat. If you're struggling with mental health issues or even just like the general panic of, I'm about to be evicted tomorrow, where do I go? So navigating that system is one of the things we're also going to focus on, as well as looking at root causes such as employment issues, and as Tracy had mentioned, mental health and addictions is a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
So what would you say Streetohome has done to help erase these causes?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What would you say Streetohome has done to help erase these root causes of homelessness?
So, do you mind if I start? Yeah. Okay. So, as I mentioned before, some of the root causes we had kind of honed in on were employment issues or lack of employment. The mental health and addictions part, which I'll let Tracy speak to after, and the system navigation part. So for employment, we actually see funded another charity called Work With Us. And what Work With Us does is it helps to provide individuals with their preferred form of employment while still maintaining a flexible schedule, making sure they're comfortable and that the employer can really meet their needs, knowing that they probably have some past traumas or are working through some things on their own. And it's also a lot of times when you're homeless, you can be unfortunately pigeonholed, especially in employment. So you'll see that sometimes employment opportunities are not necessarily up to the same skill set that someone who is newly homeless might have. So you might be a highly desirable software developer and we're going good, and then something like COVID-19 happens and suddenly you've lost your job. You're living paycheck to paycheck because Vancouver is very expensive, but you have a skill set that's not necessarily suited to the employment that people generally think or I shouldn't say that generally, but suited to the employment services that the current Vancouver system might have specifically for homeless people. So Work With Us really tries to look at your specific skill set and work with you on that. We've also done the Vancouver Rent Bank, which was one of our first projects. So what that does is it provides interest-free short-term loans to help prevent eviction or like utility cutoff. So that's been a really successful project.
Yeah, so one of the things is really important to realize is that when you look at the homelessness picture, 80% of people that are homeless, that they basically transitional homeless, they're able to navigate themselves out of homelessness. Where we try to work in the zone is around that 20% that need a little bit more assistance and help. The work that aerial projects are doing will actually help facilitate a lot more of those connections, and even for people in the 80% range, will be able to navigate faster out of homelessness. For my portfolio, we are looking at where addictions and mental health would be a barrier to you finding stability in housing and employment, and then making challenges to making those deeper sense of connections. So for us, we are looking at how we can improve what already exists. And so one of the projects that we have looked at and brought forward is called the Addiction Recovery Community Housing Model. And that has 4 components. One is an early recovery program. So that's a program for people that are wanting to address their addictions, but they don't know exactly how they want to address it. So that might be a program where they can kind of come in, land, stabilize to some degree, start learning the options, and then hopefully get matched to the best option for them. Another component is the treatment housing program, which is where for people that need to actually have a live-in residential program where they can actually start dealing with their addictions in terms of treatment. And then there's the dry housing component. So for people that are in the early recovery program, it says, you know, I just want a dry housing, but then I'll do a day program because I could go and get a part-time job and that'll kind of help me. For people that go into treatment housing, once they complete that, they're usually still vulnerable and they still need to be able to be supported. And so then they would go into dry housing where they will be living in a community where like-minded people, where their focus is recovery. And then the 4th component, which is really the peer-led piece, which is the Recovery Community Center. And that's where people can develop life skills, develop employment skills, making a plan, a life plan, and then to be supported in the process of meeting the goals of that life plan. In terms of the addiction portfolio, we are trying to figure out how can we support people better in communities after they have completed treatment, or they're considering treatment, or they're considering to address their challenges in some way. And so we have, we're bringing the Recovery Cafe model to Vancouver with a partner, the Kettle Society. And the Kettle Society will be the service provider. And the Recovery Cafe model is really brilliant because it is a membership model. It's free. It has the key cornerstone of the model is the recovery circles. So you might have a community of 400, but ultimately the people that know you best are about 8 or 10 people. And those people is where you declare what you would like to recover. So it's generic recovery. It could be mental health. It could be loss. It could be isolation. It could be addictions. It could be anything that you define. And the idea is that you would then meet with these people and then you would work on those components together. So that's a Recovery Cafe. And then we have Delancey Street, which is another model that's coming to Vancouver hopefully very soon. Thanks to COVID, it might be delayed. But it is another model that really resonates. It's a live-in program that looks at the whole self, and they use employment as that tool of recovery. So you go in there, you have your own, you have an internal community that you live and work with, and you support each other through the program and the goals that you're starting to develop for yourself. Is there anything else I'm I can't remember.
I
The
think-
recovery community centers, I guess, is the other one, but
That's
that's that's yeah.
Okay, that's great. So you mentioned all these amazing programs. What impact has Street to Home made on the homeless program specific to Vancouver?
You can answer that because of
Okay.
your graph.
So we have, and I can send this to you if you need it as well, but what we've done is we kind of calculated how many people have gone through either the supportive housing that we helped to fund, as well as some of our prevention projects, compared to the homeless count. And the other thing you really need to remember is that we're one piece of the puzzle. There are so many other nonprofit providers who are doing prevention programs and helping people navigate the system out of homelessness and offering housing. But what we had found is roughly about 4,500, I want to say, people have directly benefited from Street to Home's prevention programs that we've helped to implement, or the buildings that we've helped to provide capital for the construction of. And this is compared to a homeless count of about 2,300 per year. It did go down this year a little bit, but when we did our initial calculations, it was at 2,300 roughly. So the fact that we've prevented through the last 10 years about 4,500 people from becoming homeless, and they're now either housed or have been able to exit the homelessness services system completely is really great. It's really a great accomplishment in terms of us. So, yeah.
Wow,
No, yeah.
a lot
Our
of people.
impact is we're a 3-person team with a very active board, and we've worked for leveraged and brokered opportunities to fill in gaps and to move the improvement needle, as it were. So
Yeah, that's really impressive. So could you explain the transition process between living in poverty and living and becoming more independent?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that Street to Home does specifically, and of course this is going to change on an individual basis and how different nonprofit operators would like to do their case management as well. But for Street to Home specifically, we have implemented, I shouldn't say implemented, we have brokered and leveraged a program to be implemented called Supporting Tenants Enabling Pathways. And what that actually does is it allows people who self-identify as being ready to move on from supportive housing, which has some very intensive supports, anything from goal planning to curfews to having your meals, making sure like you're fed properly. So oftentimes supportive housing buildings might have like 2 meals a day that residents can utilize if they don't want to either cook for themselves or go out to eat, or they don't have the budget for that. So a lot of support in supportive housing, very expensive support in supportive housing at times. So STEP has basically allowed people to say, you know what, I'm ready to move on from these supports. I don't feel like I need them, and somebody else does need them, either in a shelter or on the street, to be able to stabilize, like I was able to stabilize. So Carnegie Outreach is our partner with that program, and what they do is they interview the person to ensure that they do feel ready, and they can create kind of a plan on how to transition from the supportive housing building to an independent housing. Carnegie will then give them some options if they can in terms of independent housing that's available and within their budget, and help to prepare them for the move. So they'll often hire movers. There's also up to a $2,000 grant that Carnegie can use to ensure that these people are able to purchase furniture or make sure they have kitchen utensils, because again, with supportive housing, all of that's provided already. So when you move from supportive housing to independent housing, you can really start from nothing again. So they help with that. And then of course, the other thing to help with the transition process is I'm working on a project called Smart Cities Like Intentions. And what that does is it's really asking the individual to identify what their goals are, what they'd like to work on, and how they'd like to move along. And it doesn't necessarily need to be exiting homelessness completely if they don't want to. It could be as simple as, well, you know, I really would like to see a doctor about this particular health problem. And giving them resources filtered down by what they said they needed and what their preferences were and their demographic information. So if you're a youth and you're looking for someone who specializes in youth, you can click a filter and it'll hopefully filter that out for you once we have an app made for it. But and then they'd be able to transition a little bit that way and create their own plan to transition out of homelessness
Yeah, that's really great. Is there anything that you believe the general public is uneducated on relating to poverty in Vancouver?
Um, I, I just think that, I think overall, I think there's a lot of misconceptions as to how people become homeless. There's a lot of people that live month to month, and for a majority of them, there are probably that 80% that are able to navigate themselves out. They may have a friend they can couch surf for a while until they get another job and find another place, or they may be able to move home, which is another point. We do have another program called Homeward Bound, what's not a program that we have supported, that that is about helping people find where they're going to thrive the best, right? So if Vancouver is not working for them, but they have family in Calgary and they have a basement suite, and then they have an opportunity to help that individual, you know, get a job or get access to other resources, then we would support them to move to a community where they're going to do better, right? And all those things have to be verified before they actually, before we'll actually help assist them to get there. Our goal is to help individuals or find ways, or solutions, I should say, that actually helps an individual go from having nothing to having much in terms of what they need to become a thriving citizen. And for everybody, that's so different. It isn't necessarily having, you know, all the fancy things. It can be really quite simple. It's just having a sense of community, having a good neighbor, or living in a neighborhood where they feel welcomed. It is really different, but I think overall, it's really hard to just say what homelessness is and what is missing for people. I think it's so complex, and I think it's a hard story to keep telling, which is one of the reasons why I think they try to tell it through personal stories, so people can understand what that journey was for that specific individual. And that's just one pathway that they wound up, you know, getting to where they were.
Or one of the other things we kind of discussed at Streetohome is the misconception is just how well Vancouver is really doing compared to other cities like Seattle and San Francisco, where you know, it's being declared as a crises and public health emergencies. But Vancouver, given that we've managed to keep the homeless numbers or the numbers in the homeless count quite stable, it grows by about 2% every year. But compared to other cities down south on the West Coast, we're doing really, really well, and the nonprofit providers here are doing really, really well and really innovative work with their programming to make sure that when people do fall into homelessness, they're able to exit out.
That's very good point. It's true. I mean, Vancouver is looking at Streetohome's contribution. Like Ariel had put together, and she will send it to you, what it would look like if Streetohome hadn't been here, to help sort of aid in different types of approaches around addressing some of the gaps. We're not a service provider. We don't own or operate anything. We just look for those opportunities that will either help boost or help leverage or help make a shift and change that provides an overall improvement. And Vancouver's numbers have been very stable over the past years. I mean, yes, there have been some years where the numbers have gone up a little bit, but then there have been some years where the numbers have gone down. And I would say the commitment from a lot of the partners that we actually have the privilege of working with has made a huge difference too, because they're looking for change, like they're looking for impact as well. So it's pretty impressive.
Right. So is there an aspect of your organization that you are the most proud of?
I would say just the overall impact. I think I'm proud of the fact that I am proud of the fact that we're, like you said, a think tank. We look at, you know, what can have the most impact on our efforts, with our efforts.
For me, it's, as you said, active thinking, but we're really trying to be innovators. We partner with the private sector because we know they're going to have a whole different take on things that really can inspire us. And then, of course, we also have our partners with BC Housing, Vancouver Coastal Health, and the City of Vancouver. And I'm just really proud of the fact that, you know, we bring everyone to the table, and we're really able to collaborate with everyone and have everyone's voice.
Sometimes our partners call our table Switzerland. quite nice actually, because it's a place where they can kind of come in and really have some real dialogue and conversations that in a zone that isn't that's safe enough to do. So it's an incredible thing.
Yeah, that's really great. So on a different note, like what can youth do or just the general public do to help combat this problem?
I'm gonna let you take that one.
You're the donor person. This is what I want to do here.
But there's lots of ways to get involved.
Yeah. No, for me, I think my biggest thing as a communicator is just being aware and making sure you are aware, and kind of having a self-awareness as well in terms of how we can potentially be stigmatizing either in our language or our actions, and just as a system as a whole. I think having that personal awareness is really, really important. And of course, there's many nonprofit providers that require volunteers and many different initiatives that you can really put your skill set to use. So giving your time is always something as well.
Yeah, as I've had over the years, I've had some really, really amazing calls from people that like one gentleman wanted to celebrate his birthday, and he wanted to be able to do something for individuals that were struggling with homelessness. And that's incredibly, like you said, I this is generally what I would do for my birthday, but I've decided I'm going to take what I would do necessarily and take that money, and I want to be able to celebrate it in a different way. Like Ariel said, there's tons of volunteer opportunities. Homeless organizations that are frontline service providers for homelessness initiatives always need some form of clothes. Like when you think about Covenant House, they're a younger group of individuals. So if you are a younger group of population, it'd be kind of cool to provide some jackets and jeans and stuff like that. That a lot of these individuals come in with absolutely nothing. So being able to give them something fresh and something that they can feel good in wearing, because it is relatable to their age group, is great. There's so many opportunities for people to step up and be a part of. I mean, yes, you can make donations to any of those individuals, anywhere where connection can be made and people can feel welcomed and supported.
Yeah, that's great.
I said with awareness, the awareness piece, but even just smiling at someone can make such a big difference in their life. I know we have one story that was before my time, but just how inspired someone was, that someone was willing to say hello to him every day, and how that really helped him kind of start to give him the self-confidence to move on and not think of himself as just homeless and just him.
It's huge, very big.
Yeah, that's really sweet.